it's really exciting for us to be here with you this evening and to really talk to you about, I guess, our future as a school and what we're trying to do for your student or for your children as they move forward through their education. And this is not something that we've obviously moved towards or decided to do overnight. This has been a journey for us, and it's certainly been a journey in my own principalship over the last 4 years. And I think now, probably for the last 10 years in my own career, I have been troubled enormously and immensely by the fact that we grade students and we provide students with a mark, but in actual fact, are we really giving them and their parents meaningful and purposeful feedback? Ultimately, we want our students progressing through a continuum. We want them to be demonstrating that they are actually showing progress in their learning, rather than just showing that they can achieve the outcomes, or that they can do something easily, or that they find something particularly difficult to do. And the current practices that we have at the school, and I think that many schools have, really weren't allowing us to provide you with the kind of feedback that we felt that you need, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, and that we really felt the students need in order to really empower their learning and for them to take much greater responsibility for their learning. Universally in the Western world, parents rightly demand more transparency around their child's progress and evidence that they are learning and making a year's progress for a year's worth of effort. The traditional paradigm of providing semester-based reports to students with a mark, a median, perhaps an average, and comment that is outdated by the time we receive it really doesn't cut the mustard in a context where there are technological solutions to provide parents and students and teachers with a more detailed analysis of a child's learning and individual progress. Our parent surveys over the last few years, of which you have completed many, consistently demonstrate this, with parents noting only a moderate level of satisfaction in the feedback provided to them on their child's progress in their learning at the school. Our challenge in responding to your concerns and a shifting educational paradigm is both a technical and adaptive challenge. It's technical in that we need to find new ways of assessing and reporting on student progress that is meaningful and purposeful. And it is adaptive in that the solution for doing so requires us to change our ways of thinking, knowing and doing around assessment and reporting. It requires us to do things differently and not to conform to old models because they are familiar, known and accepted. The college seeks to raise the bar for students, teachers and parents through its targeted feedback strategy, which we're going to talk to you about tonight. And through this strategy, we are committed to a few things, and I want to outline what they are for you. We are committed to targeting feedback to each student's needs and targeting teaching to what students are ready to learn, providing you with more feedback than we ever have before and to what students are ready to learn, providing you this feedback in a more timely and transparent manner, refining our processes over time and through consultation with you, which is an important part of the process, and honouring the best of the past as we invent and refine new ways of partnering with you to ensure progress for your students, and to delivering and valuing excellence for all as we have always done. It is important to understand that this is the beginning of a journey towards delivering a genuinely personalised approach to teaching and learning. Along the way, we will get things right and we will even surprise you. And at other times, we will need to evaluate our practice and say, okay, that didn't work, what next? Either way, we have a strong track record, and whatever we do will be better than what we have done in the past, and that's our commitment to you. So we want your child to be engaged in a positive cycle that operates between home and school, and I want to unpack that with you a little. And last year I went to a conference and Professor Linda Grattan spoke at this conference, and she's from the London Business School, and she's considered a leading thinker in terms of human resource management and organisational change in the world. And at this conference she spoke about this cycle that I want to talk to you about. And she called it, really, at that conference she called it the work-home cycle, but I've called it the school-work-home cycle, because I think it applies to our students. She spoke about the fact that a worker or a student is at sort of somewhere on that continuum or can be at either end. And at the extreme end, and I guess the negative end, you can have a student who comes to school from home and returns to home from school in this kind of caustic cycle, which is characterised by chronic anxiety. So they come to school often feeling guilty, overwhelmed and insecure about their capacity to learn, about their ability to achieve, where they're placed in the cohort, how do they look next to their friends, are they fulfilling the expectations of their parents, or feeling that their parents are putting too much expectation on them, feeling overwhelmed by parental expectation or home expectation. And then they arrive at school and they continue to experience the same thing at school because they may not be achieving in their learning, they may not be demonstrating the success they thought they were capable of, they may not be achieving what their parents think that they are capable of. And so they return home from school feeling angry about their experience at school, feeling angry about the fact that they're not, progressing, feeling disengaged with their learning, with the curriculum, and feeling terribly frustrated by the whole experience. And they can get stuck in this cycle. And it's not a good place for learning. Where a student is stuck in this kind of cycle between home and school, they are not going to learn and they're highly unlikely to progress. And so we've got to get them out of the cycle. But what do we do at school? We rank them and we order them. And then we tell them where they are, and sometimes that just continues to reinforce this cycle. So often our students talk about themselves as being smart or dumb. That's how raw it is. I'm smart, I'm dumb. And they often don't put themselves somewhere in between. And we've got to get them out of that kind of thinking. Because even the less able student can show progress. And oftentimes that less able student can show significantly more progress than the student who might be first in the course. But that student is often not acknowledged or celebrated because we're not really measuring that kind of progress in a real way. And so we need to get them out of that cycle. We need to create really what is a positive cycle or a flourishing cycle. And that students feeling that they're coming to school, that they're engaged in authentic learning experiences, and learning that's attached and relevant to their real-world experience and to what their real world will be or may look like in the future. Feeling resilient as individuals and about their learning, feeling like they can achieve and that they know how to achieve and they know what to do next in order to achieve, and feeling really supported in that process. So feeling that there's really good support from home, and support is very different to expectation. And at school, feeling that they're really well supported rather than this burden of expectation around what we expect them to achieve. And then returning home from school, feeling more knowledgeable, feeling inspired by the experiences they've had at school, and feeling that they're connected and that they're networked with other learners, not just at school, but in a much broader learning community. So I guess really what we're trying to do is to drive personalisation through dynamic measures of success. And there's an American psychologist, David Paul Ausubel, who stated as early as 1968, so this is a long time ago, he said, "If I had to reduce all education psychology to just one principle, I would say this: the most important single factor influencing learning is what the learner already knows. Ascertain this and teach her or him accordingly." So it really is identifying where are our learners at and what are the next steps for them in their learning. So reporting through rubrics allows us to do just this and then target our practices to move students forward in their learning. Rubrics are not new to education, but they have been largely underutilised in providing meaningful feedback to our students. The other driver, I suppose, of this strategy is that we want to drive independent, resilient learners who take responsibility for their progress. Responsibility for a student's progress does not sit squarely on the shoulders of a teacher or on your shoulders or just on the student's shoulders. It's through a partnership of those three stakeholders or those three people that students will actually progress. Defining student success in terms of progress also reinforces the value of effort and fosters in our students a growth mindset. And targeted effort and perseverance are really important to learning, and we underestimate their value and their place in a child's learning. And so when we just score a child or provide a child with a mark, we often don't provide them with any feedback on their effort. And they could get a mark which is, to us, may not look like a good mark, but in order for them to get that mark, it required an extraordinary amount of effort. And we have to find ways in which we can report to parents that kind of effort. And we're not going to do that in the first iteration of this process, but it's certainly something that we need to start to look at as we move through this journey. And I guess really for our strongest students, they simply cannot rely on raw aptitude alone to achieve success anymore. They, with the stretch provided by the teacher, need to also demonstrate progress over time rather than demonstrating that they've achieved the outcomes. So I know this is a conversation I've had with many of you, is that your child will arrive at school at the beginning of the year and they know and you know that on raw aptitude alone, they're going to succeed during the course of the year. They don't have to put in a lot of effort in order for them to succeed. I watch this in some of our students. You watch this in some of your students. And we're really doing them a disservice. Because what we're saying is that actually the benchmark is that you just demonstrate success at this stage of schooling and you're all okay. But you know what, that's not good enough. And I know for you that that's not good enough. Because we want to say to them, actually, you know what? We know that you can do this, but we want to see you working beyond stage. And this is how far beyond stage we want to see you working, because that's where you're capable. So it's really differentiating and stretching those more able students. And for those students that are struggling and who enter into a year group, and we know that they sit below stage, and you know that they sit below stage, we need to be able to say to them, that's okay. That's okay. We're going to work with you so that you can take the next steps and the next steps and the next steps so that you can move into stage and quite possibly move into mid-stage. So it's really about encouraging progress so that they can see that there is actually benefit in their effort. So learning sometimes is really difficult and requires sustained effort and commitment. And if it doesn't require that, then it's not learning. Okay, so if a child says learning is always easy, it means that they're not engaged in the learning or they're not being stretched enough. Failure has to be a part of our experience as learners. Now, failure when there's poor effort and no perseverance is completely unacceptable. Okay, it will be always unacceptable here and in any other school. But failure that a student experiences when it is associated with really targeted effort and perseverance is okay. Because what it says is that they haven't quite got it yet, that perhaps the instruction or the pedagogy that we used, it didn't allow them to get it, and that they need further intervention in terms to move forward. But what we also need to encourage and acknowledge is that they still show effort and perseverance in even making the attempt to get there. And that's what reinforces a student's commitment to learning, and that's what we need to also acknowledge in our students, as well as excellence that students achieve. These are the skills, when you look at the Australian curriculum, that students at the end of Year 10 are expected to have. Now, they're pretty complex skills. And for those of you that work in workplaces, you will know that some of your colleagues, your peers, your employees don't have those skills. But I think what's really important is that we understand the complexity of what the Australian curriculum is requiring of our students. Now, if we want our students to be able to do those things by the end of Year 10, we really need to shift the way that we are assessing and reporting on them, but also how we're teaching and learning. What are we focusing on in our teaching and learning in order for them to be able to do those kinds of things? And then I think the last thing is that we need to drive this excellence together. It is a partnership. It requires your participation and it requires your feedback. And my commitment to you is we're not going to get it all right in the first iteration. Okay, it's going to be better than what they've had, and you're going to have much richer information than you've ever had before. But we will need your feedback in the process about what's working, what's not working, what works for your child, what doesn't work for your child. And we need to also, I guess, sit back a little bit from it and allow the process to start and to iterate before we make judgments about it.